So I've been talking to, a couple chicks, foreign chicks, just getting to know and stuff like that. And even reflecting on, past relationships. And, you know, women historically always say like communication is very important to them in a relationship. And I was talking to this Ethiopian woman a couple of days ago, and when it comes to me telling chicks what I want or expect in a relationship, like I'm very detailed, you know, to sex, to how I would like a household ran, um, the ways I want communication to be. Like I'm just very detailed on a lot of things. And guys that, especially foreign women, guys that deal with foreign women, is like once you kind of go down your list of things that you want or expect, and then you ask them the same question, like what are their wants, expectations, they their initial response is, okay, if I do those things, or if I'm that type of woman, like what do you offer? And that question irritates me. It's like what do I offer? Like you're supposed to tell me what you want. It's almost like it's almost like women be afraid to sell themselves short by just telling you what they want. I feel like they want to ask you what you offer, because it's like a job. It's like going on a job and you not really knowing what your worth is, and the job tell you all the benefits or their expectations, and then they ask you, okay, so what do you want for a salary? And if you don't really know your worth or what the job can pay, you're probably gonna ask the same question, like, okay, what is the salary range? Which is not a bad question. You don't want to sell yourself short, but I think it's uh I think it's hypocritical for women to say that communication is important, but don't know how to communicate what they want. And so a lot of times what I experience is that it's like pulling teeth trying to get information out of women what they want. And then they'll become very generalistic. Salute, Drew. Then they'll become very generalized. Well, I just want to be happy. I just want, to be taken care of. Um, you know, some foreign chicks might be like, I want to be able to, help my family, my parents, if they're struggling. But they'll be very generalized. So it's like, okay, well, what does that look like? What does you want to be happy look like? Like what things that you want? And they'll say more sentimental things like, I just want to feel, respected, loved. And so we know women get frustrated in relationships when they don't get what they want or things don't go their way. And it's not until the breakup, until they're more detailed about what they're not getting. So what I mean. So it frustrates me, um, when women make communication so important but don't know how to communicate. Let me see who in the chat. Drew said, "Bro, no one in the space is talking about getting a Benin passport. That passport is eligible to descendants of slaves that have Benin DNA." Salute. I seen the article, man. You know, it's something I wanted to kind of share, but at the same time, like it's been other countries that that put up something, and then it was either only temporary, or it was a fine print where you know it didn't apply to everybody. So and then it's just with this quote unquote diaspora wars, it's hard to even, a lot of people are going to be they're tuned out on trying to hear anything that sounds like Pan Africanism. So it's hard to it's hard to put that information out where it will be like received. But salute to you on that. Um, and I'll keep it in the back of my mind. Um, but yeah, man, the communication thing. And so another thing too is this young lady. She was asking me about um, content creation, and she was like, because I told her, I do content creation as well, and she was like, I want to create content. So I said, okay, what type of content you want to do? She was like, I don't know. Can you give me some ideas? And I'm just like, how can you want to do something and then don't know what you want to do, and how you want things, and the goals behind it. So this communication in general, I think is more a problem with women than men, as a lot of them put it. Now, I will say in the United States, women are more detailed on what they're looking for. Like, before, women didn't really, you know, talk about like a dude's height. They never really they talked about money, but they never talked about what that looks like, how much money a man should be making. Now women are more detailed. Like, okay, a man making 200,000, 300,000 a year would be able to afford the lifestyle that I want. Women are being more detailed, and it it brings to mind another thing is that women don't really know. They really don't have game naturally. They really don't know how to figure things out on their own. And so that's one reason why they can't communicate, or don't really know, or don't know how to be detailed. Women had to learn from other women to say, oh, okay, you have to look at this. If you have to look at a man that's making this type of money in order to have this lifestyle. And then they learn, like, okay, well, what type of jobs do men do where they can make 300,000 dollars a year? And then they kind of hear stuff from other women. It's like, okay, he might have to have his own business, 9 to 5s. A dude working a 9 to 5, unless he's like, a surgeon, or, working in banking, he's not going to make, that type of money. And so that's why women start, criticizing dudes working 9 to 5s, because they've been told by somebody that certain careers make certain type of money that could bring the lifestyle that these women want. Um, just understanding just the psyche of women is amazing. And when I talk to like some of the like when I talk to women, and me being older, and men, women typically like older men, not only for stability, because women like to learn from men. Women ask me advice, my opinions, and things of that nature. And um it made me realize that uh how 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 women can be influenced by other people, because I don't want to say they don't have a mind of their own, but they don't demonstrate the ability to um to learn independently. And I was thinking about this. This was kind of funny. I was thinking about how you know how a lot of women, you introduce them to another woman, a woman, and they exchange numbers quickly, and they gossip, they talk. I mean, you notice they talk, and it's like they sponge off of each other information. I wish I had like a diagram I could kind of like paint a picture of what I'm saying. And I was thinking about this. Like imagine a battery. Imagine like how you have the on your phone when your battery is low is like 100%, 50%, 10%. So a lot of women enter adulthood, you know, at 20%, at 20% full. And then it's like when they get around other women, that it increases. They start talking to a handful of women in this group. Now they're at 40%. You introduce them, or they meet women in passing or school. They learn a little bit more. Now it's at 75%. And then at some point, like they've interacted with enough women and got enough game. Now they're fully charged. And men we don't need to we don't men we don't need to we don't learn like that. We typically learn from life experiences. We typically use logic. If this happened, then this is the consequence, or this is the outcome. So we look at things from a more philosophical way, and we could break things down, and we come to conclusions. um we do get game from each other in certain ways, um but it's more through observation. We learn from other people's mistakes by observation. um we take notes and things like that. So that's why you know I'm talking about two different things: communication, and then one of the reasons why women struggle with um articulating what they want, and then understanding how to communicate. And they can't develop those skills on their own. They need other women to to master that. And sometimes this is what frustrated me in past relationships when it came to certain women, because even my ex, I might be hanging out with a friend and his girl and this girl. I'd be like, why do every time women, when they get around other women, why do they gotta exchange numbers? Like that's like, it just felt so weird to me. Like what is so important for you to get this girl number so y'all could talk about what? It's weird to me, but I do understand what happens. They It's information. You get a woman, let's say you bring her to the US, or thinking about bringing to the US. Let's just say she's from, I'm gonna use Ethiopia for example. She really don't know people out here like that. But you have a friend, he's married to an Ethiopian chick. You like, oh, okay, my guy, he married an Ethiopian girl. Let me enter, maybe y'all could talk, and she can, you know, answer any questions. Um, uh, they're gonna be, she's gonna be, it's gonna be she's gonna be a sponge, and she's going to learn game from that other woman. Maybe things she never thought about or considered. What up, Keith? Let me read some of these comments real quick. Antonio said men are actually better communicators than women. A man is straightforward. Women tend to beat around the bush. That's a fact. Marquis said, "What up? What up? What it do, man?" No, that's a fact, man. That's a fact. It's that's the only thing that annoys me about getting to know getting to know women. Because they're different. They're a different species than men when it comes to just psychology. Um, and it's very difficult to pair bond because they they don't just have a mind on their own, and maybe it's just a survival thing. They don't want to just rely on their own information, so they need gain from other women. So I'll give you another real life example. So um so this Ethiopian girl in Ethiopia, I'm getting to know, right? Her sister, her younger sister is married to an American man. And I didn't meet her like on no dating site or any case like that. Like I met her in passing. And so I was kind of surprised, like, oh wow, you got a sister married to an American. Like, how did they meet? And so she told me that they met um because he had a homie that um that's in a relationship with an Ethiopian girl, and he asked his homie, like, see if your girl know anybody, for me that she could introduce to me. And I talked to the brother. He's pretty cool. And so he met her, and I think he told me he was divorced before, and he met her, and he just said he just seen a totally different type of woman that he was used to. And I think he proposed to her like within a few months, and then eventually he ended up marrying her and bringing her to the U.S. So I'm talking to her sister, and I'm like, well, I was like, well, I was like, I want to talk to him. Maybe I could understand a little bit more about your family from his experience with his wife, and I could pick his brain a little bit. So she gave me his number, and I reached out to him, and he told me how he met his wife, and kind of his journey to to get to that point. And so I asked him about because they're Orthodox. I was like, well, I asked him was he Orthodox, and he was like, no. And I was like, well, Orthodox women supposed to marry other Orthodox. And so he was just saying, like, the family liked me so much, and we really didn't get into religious conversations. But to make a long story short, he basically said that um, that was glossed over to a certain extent. So I said, okay, that's different. No, we know when it comes to religion, some people are very strict and some people are a little bit more liberal, and when it comes to certain things. So I understand that. And so he told me, and I asked him about how did he approach marrying the girl, and he said that he had a representative meet with the family, and he basically said he had brought gifts and things for the parents and stuff like that, you know and and I asked him. I said, well, because it basically sounded like he paid, because he mentioned like paying like a dowry. And I said, well, why are you paying a dowry in Ethiopians don't have a dowry system like other African cultures. And he was like, well, it's not technically a dowry. He was like, I just wanted to you know show my appreciation and love and things like that. So In my mind, I'm like, man, he fucking up the game. Like he's, you know what I mean? Like it's already protocol being broken because he's not orthodox, and then he's spoiling the parents with things, and that's not really how things go. So I'm bringing that up because the girl I'm getting to know, I'm telling her, I'm like, me and him is not gonna be the same. And so the game, you know what I mean? So she might look at the game as like, okay, this is how how he's treating my sister is how she's gonna expect me to be, you know. And I'm a different personality. Like I know the rules of the game, and so the communication thing is that she don't know if he never existed, right? When it comes to the conversation on what she wants and what her expectations are, she wouldn't really have any, you know. And whether she could communicate it or not would be moot because she wouldn't really know what to expect. She might just be like, you know, she just wants to. She might just say, "I would just want to be married," um, you know, happy, and not have to worry about finances. But now that she has observed, her sister's marriage and probably talking, talking to her sister about a lot of things. Now she has a different set of expectations, which wasn't generated on her own. She had to. She's getting game, and sometimes game is not accurate, but she's getting game from her sister, and it's not really real. It's not really realistic, and that's the problem. That's the problem. That's the miscommunication part. Just like when I mentioned about women giving other women game about trying to find men that make 200, 300,000 dollars a year. You can have that information all you want, but it's not real. It's not realistic. You set realistic expectations um, with with the information that they're getting. Let me see comments. New free mixtape said, "Have you heard of BGS Ignore octane levels?" No, no. I might have to look it up. Ash L said, "I'm not paying no damn dollar. I'm not paying it either." Drew said, "Makes sense. He messing up the game." He said, "Makes no sense to do this. I'm paying your family just to take you on, and so I can pay for everything." Um, nope, not doing it. Yeah, man, I ain't with that, man. Even like even in my marriage before, like the family didn't really embrace me like that. They was cool in person and stuff like that, but um, I was just I ain't gonna say I was just a gringo, but like it was just a it was just a cultural disconnect. And it's like why would I even want to financially support a family that don't embrace me like that for whatever reason. For whatever reason. Sometimes you could blame the woman because, most of the time family they're gonna go off the energy of the woman. Like if she not rocking with you, like if she second guessing you, then definitely the family might go second guess you. And then sometimes families just have their own independent, sentiments and things like that. And so, me talking to this particular Ethiopian woman, even about taking care of a family, I'm like, well, I want to get to know your family. I want to see if they really fuck with me like that. I didn't say it like that, but I want to see if they really fuck with me like that. Um, and some of the cultural challenges, even with that, is that they typically don't expect you to meet their parents until you basically asking for her hand in marriage. And I'm just like, why would I why would I agree to helping your family when I can't get to know them until we're married? Like that's too late. You know what I mean? And so I got to get to know I got to get to know them just like I'm getting to know you. So that's a challenge. And she was like, "Well, I understand. It's just that meeting parents during the dating or getting to know phase is just not really a common thing." Was like, well, how you gonna know if they're gonna fuck with you like that? What I mean? Everybody gonna have a smile on your face if you sending money and gifts and stuff. Everybody gonna have a smile on your face when it comes to that. But you don't know at the core, you know. So it's the communication gets harder even with the foreign chicks a lot of times because either sometimes it's a language barrier, even if they can speak some basic English. Sometimes they don't may not understand the context. So that's why now, even exploring Africa, like I just focus on English speaking countries. Because Spanish, Portuguese, or other languages. You got to deal with translation, then with context. There are challenges with other English speaking countries, but it's not as bad. Um, Ethiopians, for example, they have their own language. Some speak English, some don't. So I just focus on the ones that could speak English, whatever the case may be, man. But yeah, dude, he fucking up the game for me. I'm like, man, you set the high bar, and then she told me her sister was saying something like, I don't know if I like him because he seems like he's gonna be, more controlling, things like that, blah blah blah. So it's like, it might not even get anywhere, to be honest with you, you know. But I'm just kind of, I don't want to say using her, but I'm talking to her to learn, and so I could get game, so I could learn about the culture. You know what I mean? Learn more things, and then I could kind of get an idea of like what what Ethiopian women are at the core, like their personality, their makeup. But for what I have noticed so far is that out of all the women, all the countries I've traveled to in Africa, Ethiopian women tend to be more serious about relationships. You don't really hear them talking like Kenyan women or South African women, where they're prioritizing um, going to school or getting a job over relationship and family. Um, so marriage is very important to a lot of Ethiopian women, which is a good thing. Which is a good thing, um, for a lot of reasons. Let's see. Salute, Styles King. Man, I'm in Philly right now, man. Next month, man. Plan on hitting up Africa again. TZ to be exact. Star King said if they don't meet you during the dating phase, that means they are not guiding her anyway. Yeah, that's true. Drew said, yeah, the whole family looking at you like you're um, the goose that lay the golden egg. Yeah, yeah, man. Like if family's cool, like I'm trying to, I asked dude, I said, well, any of your past marriages, like, were you cool with the family? He was like, well, one of my ex-wife's family, he was like, love me to death. Like they still talk to me that day. You know, I wouldn't mind I wouldn't mind being there for a family that I felt like they just love they really genuinely like love me like I was one of their own. Like, I can't really out of most of my relationships I never had that. Maybe like one or two where the mother or father they really really like me. You know what I mean? And even with my ex in college, her mom used to her mom used to be like, I know you, because I went out of state. I went out of state for college. My ex mom, she used to come have me come over. She'll cook for me, and she was like, she was like, I understand what it's like being a mom, and your mom is far away, and so she just kind of was like, she was just kind of like a mom away from my mom because I was out of state. So like somebody like that, I would look out for all day. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and I'm sure most guys feel the same way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you felt like you got love and treatment like a mom or pops, an extended moms or pops, like it wouldn't even be a question. You know what I mean? But most of these people, one, you're not gonna get to know them on that level, and then two, you know, you at a disadvantage because once people know you got money, it's hard to know if they're, if their admiration for you is going to be genuine anyway. So it's just difficult. Um, and I ain't gonna lie, you're gonna start to. I'm gonna start to think like, um, you know, looking at, are we at some point are we gonna have to start looking at women that are of a certain, economic situation, you know, because a woman's family could have, they could have a business, they could both be, employed, but they still could be not be making a lot of money because the country or economy just doesn't pay that much, or businesses don't make that much where they can live comfortable. So that's still something to be determined. Let's see. Buck said women won't want you. Women want you. Yeah, that's true, man. I don't like that. Women do want you to read their mind. Salute, Ronan. Ronan in the building. But yeah, man, that's the thing. Women want you to read their mind. Okay. I know what you want. You want, and a lot of times, like I kind of understand what women want, expectations are, but I want them to kind of tell me. I want them to kind of tell me too and be detailed. And they're still going to leave out something because they don't want to. They don't. Women are afraid to say something that's going to turn you off, and you know, so they're not. They still not going to tell you everything. You know, they'll say sex not important you're not until you're not dicking them down enough, or whatever the case may be. Like a lot of things is you got to take it as a grain of salt too when it comes to how these women communicate, man. It's just it's just how it is. Let me see. I had what else did I want to mention real quick? Um yeah, most of these women too, man, want um they want a monthly they probably want something in the form of a monthly allowance too. But if that's the case, just say it. Just say it. Women women need to just be like, especially if you make, more money than them, they need to just be like, okay, I'm looking for this type of man. Um, I want to be taken care of. This what it looks like, X amount of whatever currency a month, I'll be happy, this type of, living situation. And then guys can make the decision to say, okay, I could afford that, you know, if it's realistic for me, for us. Do I, not, is she worth, is she worth it? You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, differences can command different things. At the end of the day, you know. Um, so women have to be more detailed, but you know, I'm preaching to the choir. That's just something women just gonna have to struggle with, and we just gotta, you know, sometimes be patient, and we just got to pull it out of them. So now I'm just at the point where I'm just being very detailed. Like, okay, how much dick do you want every day? Um, is it okay we live in an apartment, or do you want a house? You just got to ask these direct questions, because they're not gonna be as detailed. So let me one more comment, then I'm gonna have to get out of here. Let's see. Buck says salute. No excuse. They think we can read minds. They don't know how to properly communicate. Ashel said women want you to keep guessing so they don't have to be held accountable as facts for what they communicate to you. They will never be direct. It's a manipulative tactic. That's very true, bro. Style King said he back in the A. Real said, hey, bro, so I'm just trying to understand you're totally against paying dowry or bride price no matter what. If she's a virgin, it's part of the culture. No, what I'm saying is it's not Ethiopian culture to pay dowry. That's what I'm saying. Now, if it was from a culture that does practice dowry, then if she's a it depends what it is. Like if it's like, I mean, from what people have mentioned that have been in situations like that, that dowry could be like $3,000 to $5,000. Let's just put it out. You know what I mean? Um, so if it's $3,000 going to a family, and that's a lot of money to them, I wouldn't trip about that. I wouldn't trip about that. In some West African cultures, people men be saving their whole life to marry a chick. I'm not paying no 10, 20, $50,000 to marry a chick. No, that's crazy. But it just has to make sense, and it's supposed to be a negotiation too, because you know you got to tell the family what you expect. You know what I mean? If they're gonna keep her in check if she get out of line. So it's negotiating the relationship too. But yeah, man, I gotta get out of here, man. It's your boy Norris.